Okay, so in our third Secrets of an Educational Designer video, I'm going to talk about constructivist classrooms and the role of technologies in these types of classrooms. And I guess a lot of this has been inspired by John Dewey because of his quote here: "If we teach today's students as we taught yesterday's, we rob them of tomorrow." And I think that's a very powerful message around not just a constructive viewpoint of teaching, but also around how we teach today, no matter who our students are. And one of the questions that's kind of been raised around this area is, how do you best develop your knowledge with technologies? Developing knowledge as a constructive approach to learning. So take a moment to jot down all the different ways you would prefer to learn if you are the student. Think about how you obtain new information and how you record that information and what that means to you as the learner in this role. Then put your teaching kind of hat on and think about what kind of tools are going to be useful to help decide what is going to be valuable to learners that learn the same way as you, but also how it can be used most effectively. These are considerations as we move forward. Now, constructivism is a theory, and it has many elements as proposed by different theorists over time. But the main ones seem to be more around Dewey, Piaget, and Vygotsky. And some of the areas of what this actually means has been summarized, and constructivist learning theory is just a theory, but some of these you might actually agree with straight off the bat. Some of them you might not really believe in until you unpack it further. But to summarize, it is around how knowledge is constructed. And there are a few aspects here that really do talk to the active element in that role. That learning is also social, that learning is not just an active process, that learning is contextual, that people learn to learn as they learn, and that learning exists within the mind, that knowledge becomes very personal, and motivation is definitely key to learning. Now, constructivism in the classroom is about the application of this theory. So it's not just enough to know the theory. Anyone in education must know how to implement this in a classroom setting. So there are 4 elements that are very common to the constructivist approach. The first is to elicit the prior knowledge, and we use pre-tests or discussions and sometimes stories and videos to help pull out the information of what people in the room already know. Then there's opportunities to create a movement away from that prior knowledge and move towards something more. And that is really quite contextual for what you are focusing on. But those opportunities have to be numerous, and they have to be developed within the classroom context that's been worked in. There's also a real strength around how we apply knowledge and how learners can apply their knowledge. And that includes presentations and having discussions and opportunities for feedback. And reflection is certainly a very important aspect of this whole process, and that learners are given opportunity to reflect on the process they went through and opportunities to demonstrate the connections that they have made. For example, inquiry-based learning is a very common constructivism approach to learning and is used in many different areas. And as you can see through this description, it is very similar to the process that was previously outlined as an approach. So students create their own questions and seek to solve them through research and observation. They make connections between their prior knowledge and share the information and understanding discovered through their research. Students conclude by identifying possible gaps and developing further questions for the next project. And of course, technologies can be used in each of these stages to enhance the learning opportunity. Before we have a look at the technologies, let's just have a look at some opportunities here that are listed by curriculum area or a content area, and the technology that might be best used for that. So gardens and how we use gardens in an educational context is certainly very science driven, and can be very experimental. However, technologies can be used to help collect the data and visualize data, and that's really quite an important aspect. Just as media or arts can be used to examine objects and assess prior knowledge, such as looking at features or drawing elements. And technologies may be used here to help create the representations that the child or the adult understands, and maybe even to access some factual information. The approach to play and trial and error are very integrated, particularly when testing out ideas, whether they be physically designing or actually just experimenting. And I guess this is part of this process that is built into how knowledge is developed. And of course, technologies may be used here for not only researching secondary information, but perhaps even to look at what others have been done in the past to help solve a particular problem. So some of the tips I've kind of jotted down around how you would build a constructivist toolbox of technologies. Think about the types of actions you want that technology to perform, particularly in a constructive environment. There needs to be opportunities to have some ideas being built, okay, and constructing and recording the knowledge that is already known by the people you're working with, such as children or even as adults. You also need to consider the types of communication and how people will talk and communicate, either in a classroom or in an online kind of component. However, you also want to talk about how they will work together, how they'll collaborate. We definitely need to consider how you'll take notes as a learner, encouraging others to take notes, and how those notes are actually collected and interpreted. And there is a big strength here around the use of multimodal technologies. And of course, there is also another area that is about communicating. It is about the presentation of knowledge and showing what has been constructive. And sometimes videos and audio are very useful strategies to help build in not just as a multimodal communication if used together, but how children, very young children, can actually communicate using these types of technologies. So some of the technologies that are very useful in this space are built around how we can enhance a constructivist view, but also how we can help map information, gather information, visualize data, and also explain what is being understood by the learner. So Evernote is a really important example here, and it is more of a note-taking application that is multimodal in nature. And so tools like Evernote can be used to help gather information throughout an inquiry journey. Now, Canva has many elements, and one of the main elements here I wanted to focus on was the infographic element. And Canva has this feature where infographics can be easily made and constructed, but they have to have information put into them. They have to have statistics placed into them to make them relevant. And that's just a way of visualizing information. And the Show Me is an application. It's a tablet-based app that enables the user to explain visually and using audio what they understand. It uses kind of a whiteboard technology in this sense. So they're just 3 examples, and there are countless examples with technology. So thank you.